This is my first prophecy not related to messages from the sky. Day before Halloween, I had to go fix a hot water tank. Power vented hot water tank called a PowerFlex. That's what these pictures are. This close-up picture is of the bottom of the hot water tank, which is where I had to do the work. There is a pressure switch on the bottom left of this assembly right here that's white with a little brass section, which is actually a diaphragm. That is what I needed to replace. But the company sent me a different switch, a different diaphragm, a different unit that they said, oh, this is the right one, you can use this. And it didn't even have a place to screw in to that little blue thing that's on the bottom. And so I had to fit in a fitting and a hose and then put it onto the hose. And I tried it and it didn't work. And I said, well, maybe the pressure's just not high enough, because when the gas valve, which is the top part of this assembly, the one with the big round black circle there, when you turn that up to hot, it tries to turn on by turning the gas valve on, which sends gas pressure down the pipe. And normally, without all this other assembly on the bottom, it's just a pipe that goes down into the behind that gray door, that dark gray door, and makes the fire and makes it go. And that would be with a regular chimney, that would be fine. But with a power venter, you've got to make sure the fan is on and everything's venting properly, and before you turn the gas on. So all this mechanism needs to be there to be able to run the fan up on top of the unit and make sure that the air is going out the chimney, or out, lack of a chimney, out a plastic pipe actually. And I was saying, well, if the pressure's not high enough to get this pressure switch that they sent me to work, what happens when the gas valve turns on, it sends gas down into that blue section on the bottom. And it also sends it down one of these pipes that's on the right side. Just to the right of that big round black section, there are two pipes. They're both pilot lights. And one of them turns on, one of them keeps the pilot burning all the time and keeps the thermocouple hot. And the other one is when the gas valve turns on, it turns on this secondary pilot light, but it also puts pressure into that pressure switch, that golden part, or that brass part where the diaphragm is, to turn on the switch that turns electricity on to the fan up on top. And then there's a vacuum switch up there that sends a signal back down to this blue thing on the bottom, which is actually a solenoid valve that turns the gas on to the main burner, and then it starts making fire. Well, the switch being bad, it wouldn't turn on the fan up top. So I says, well, maybe it's just, if they sent me a pressure switch, it's just not getting high enough pressure. So if I partially block that secondary pilot light down underneath, I'll be able to get high enough pressure to make the pressure switch go. I didn't know at the time that they didn't even send me a pressure switch. It was actually a vacuum switch. But I didn't know that, so I said, well, I need to go down inside this dark gray door on the bottom, pull that off, reach in there, and do something to partially obstruct the gas going through the secondary pilot light tube. And I couldn't really do it through the door like I thought I might. I had to flatten out a piece of the pipe that was curved over, and I had to take it out and get it in my hand where I could see it to be able to do that. So I had to take apart everything below the black circle, the black circular. Actually, it's the gas setting. It's the thermostat for the gas valve, which is that gray box on the top of this assembly. So between the blue box and the round black circle, there's this brass piece of fittings that I've got to turn it out. Or if I could get the gas pipe below the blue solenoid valve, I could take out the fire stuff on the bottom and get to work on it. And I tried turning that, couldn't get it off. It was just so tight. And so I said, okay, let's take it off the gas valve and I'll take the whole assembly out. Well, I did, except where it was turning, which is basically the top of that little brass thing, right at the bottom of the black circle, is where the nut is that I had to unscrew. And so I got a 3/4 inch wrench, it fit, and I went to loosen it up, and I could only turn it a 1/6 of a turn before my wrench hit the side of the tank. And to get it back on, I could only go a 1/6 of a turn. So I kept doing that, but the third time I did it, it looked like the nut was too wide. So I got a bigger wrench, and I tried to do it with a bigger wrench. And anyway, this is going to be a long, long story if I drag it all out, because it took me 2.5 to 3 hours to do a job that should have taken about 2.5 minutes on this job. And what took me the longest is I did get that brass nut that's on the bottom of that black circle in the middle, that assembly. I got that off, but it was binding on the pipe that it was turning on. You couldn't turn it with your fingers. You had to turn it with a wrench. And because one side of the nut was bigger than the others for some reason, maybe because somebody over tightened it and burred the metal out, I didn't have a file to be able to file it down. So I just kept working on that. Anyway, I got the thing out. I got the modification I was going to do done, and I went to put it back in, and I just could not get that fitting nut back up into that gas valve that's right below, or the spot right below that round circle. That nut going up in there just would not go. Normally you grab it with your fingers, you pick it up because it'll turn by itself, nice and loose on its pipe, and you can just get it started with your fingers and you tighten it up with a wrench. Well, this thing was just binding so much, I had to use a wrench to even turn it. And when I did, when I held the assembly up in there, the nut just kept falling down and it wouldn't stay up there where the hole was to catch onto the threads. So I took a couple wrenches that were the right thickness that would go around that pipe, just below that nut that wouldn't stay up. And so I wedged these wrenches in there, and that would hold the nut up. And then I held the whole thing up in there, and I turned that 3/4 inch wrench to turn that nut, and it just would not catch the threads. And I thought sure I was stripping the threads. And I kept trying for over 2 hours, just frustrated and tired. The room was dark. I had a little light on my hat that was getting dark because the batteries were going dead. Everything was going wrong. And, well, let's just make the story short. I could go on for hours of what went wrong. But finally, after 2.5 hours, I prayed, Lord, please help me get this thing straight. Help me get it in place. Help me get it up there, and help me get that thread started, and help me get this thing put back together. Because tomorrow is Thanksgiving Day. My tenant is going to want hot water, and it's also the heat source for the house. So to have heat, we got to have this hot water tank working. And I can't get any parts tomorrow, and it's already getting late today, so I won't be able to get any parts today. And I don't know, this section of brass fitting right there, there's no way I can buy that part. So I'm gonna have to either replace the whole tank or something. Please help me get this thing back together so I can at least get it to make heat by bypassing that pressure switch and letting the fan run all the time. And I prayed, I tried it again, it didn't work. I prayed again, I looked at one direction, I looked at another direction. I said, well, the gas valve might be leaning a little bit to the left, so make sure my pipe is leaning to the left so it's straight with the gas valve. Please, Lord, help me get this thing going. Finally, after 3 hours for a 2.5-minute job, I finally got it up in there, got the thread started, got the thing together, had some other problems getting the rest of it together and modified properly, and finally I got the thing done. And later on the day I asked my wife, I says, maybe God was trying to tell me something from that job. And she said, yeah? You mean never give up? And I said, well, that's what I get out of it. So the Lord was telling me from this 3.5 hours of beating my head against the wall trying to get this machine working again, He was telling me, no matter how tough the circumstances are, never give up. And you know what? That's what Donald Trump says. That's what he said in the speech before he was elected the first time. He said, never, ever, ever give up. And so there was the lesson that God was trying to teach me. So call it a prophecy if you want. It's a message from God. So that's what we're going to go with for today. Not a message from the sky, but a message from God.